Okay, so let's add the next step to this game that we're slowly putting together. So I added another button here, and the purpose of this button is to display the value that's chosen with the random button. You'll notice that this is now working again. Okay, so I can set any one of the 16.8 million colors by turning the individual potentiometers right here. But I can still generate a random color. Okay, but now it's only on for about a second and a half. But if I want to redisplay that color, I can push and hold this button, and that redisplays the color. So I can come along here and say, oh, it looks like a little bit of a purplish blue, so maybe I need to turn up my blue, maybe I need to turn up my red, maybe I need to turn down my green, and I can sit there and try to match these colors and simply compare it to the random one by pushing that button. Okay? So that being said, let me pause this and let's build it and we'll move on. So give me a moment. Okay, so the first thing we need is another button, and just like before, I'm going to have the close ends, the two wires that are kind of close together, on one side of the IC gap and the other two on the other side. So I'm going to push it in firmly until it sits, nice and flush on the board. And then I'm going to take one of these two. I'll choose this one here. Okay, so it's going to be in the same column as that little wire right there. And I'm going to bring it to ground. And then I'm going to choose the other one, and I'm going to bring it across, and I'm going to put it in pin 3 right next to the 4 that we already had. Okay? Now let's take and change our code. This won't take long at all. Now, let's keep in mind that in this particular case, we want to be able to access these colors from any function, because we're going to create another function that's going to be responsible for this button's behaviors. So I do want to modify that a little bit. So let's go down and find those variables here. These are the variables that held the color. Okay? Well, instead of making them local, what we want to do is we want to make these guys global. So I'm just going to copy this one right here. Actually, I guess I can copy both of that. And I'm going to go up here to my global section here. And I'm going to create a variable, the global here, and I'm actually going to initialize it to 255. So when it first turns on, it'll have some value. And I'm going to copy this and paste it 2 more times, and that'll be my red, my green, and my blue. And then what I need to do is I need to go down to my function here. I don't want to create another instance of it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the creation of the variables, and we're going to be using the variables that are created in globals. Okay, let's go up to globals again, and we're going to have another button, right? So this was our mix button. I think we're going to need a maybe a display button, so I think I'll even call it that. So let's call it display button. And we've hooked it into pin 3. So I'll change that to a 3. And let's take this here in setup. Okay. We now have to initialize that button. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to make that button both an input, and we're going to make it high by connecting the pull-up resistor. So we need to have our display button as an input and a pull-up. All right, sweet. Now let's go down here to our check button function, and we're going to have to do 2 more. We're going to have to create 1 more function and 1 more addition to our check buttons. So let's start with this. Let's take, actually we're going to copy this whole thing, because we're going to delete a chunk of it. This is going to go really quick. All right, so let's make this display color. And let's change that to display color. All right. Well, we don't want to recreate anything. We don't want to generate some random colors. So literally all we have to do is delete that. And display color is simply going to display the values, all right, that were generated here because these are now globals. Okay, so once they've been replaced here in this function, well, they're going to be held as globals so we can use them and reuse them over and over again. So our display color is already done. Nice. So let's go to our check buttons. I think basically what we want to do is we want to copy this and let's paste it. Let's make it an else. Oops. I cannot spell. Okay, we'll make it an else if. And we're not interested in our mix button anymore. We're interested in our display button. And we can actually even have it output that the display button has been pressed. So let's do that. Put a capital D, make it look a little bit better. And instead of running random color, we actually want to run our display color. All right, so let's do display color. And I think actually we're going to want this to be on. Like when you generate the random color, I think you want it to be on for a little bit longer than 500 milliseconds. Gives you a chance to actually look at it. So now we've got this check buttons going, and if this button is pushed, well, it's going to give us a random color. Else if this button is pushed, it's simply going to display the color. So the last thing we need is to be able to activate these guys again. So we can do that right here. We can just throw in an else. And the else is going to be, well, we'll go back to our original loop, which is the first thing we played with, and we'll simply make it that. Okay? So in theory, I think this should work. So let me go ahead. I've already saved it as video 4, which is the one we're shooting right now. So I'm going to verify it, make sure I didn't do something silly like I usually do. I did not. Let's load it up. And all right, we have a default color. This seems to be working fine. I can change those colors. I can push this button and it generates a random color, and then I can push this button and redisplay that random color. So I can see I've got a lot more green, so I could turn my green up quite a bit, and I must have an awful lot of green and not a lot of blue. Oh, here we go, getting closer. I'm not going to spend a huge chunk of time in this, but obviously you can then turn these knobs and do your best to try to match that color up. So with that, I'm going to end this video, and I'll see you guys again shortly.